In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Good evening. We are so glad to have you join us again tonight for day 2 of our tour of Israel. Ashley and I told Cindy she looks like she's sitting in one of those lovely gardens in Israel with the beautiful greenery, and it just looks marvelous. So you're in the same location, but now you've moved outside for good internet. Right?
Yes, I could not get my internet to work in the van. So here we are in the Dart's gorgeous garden in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so, yes, they have box turtles that walk around here. And it's still during the balloon festival that we're recording this. And so maybe a balloon will fly by. Now that you got a little bit of a picture of the sky there, we'll see.
No, there you go. Absolutely. Well, we're going to continue with our second day of the tour in Israel. Y'all let me know. Is that coming up good?
Yeah, that looks great.
Good. Okay. And this day we went to Masada, to Qumran, and the Dead Sea.
Mm-hmm.
And we left Jerusalem.
The bus rides were so fascinating, weren't they, ladies? The way that Luke would fill us with all this material of what we were about to see, the significance of it, the biblical background, all of that. And then he'd hand the phone to our other guide that he'd hired, Zach, who is Jewish. And Zach would tell us from his perspective everything that these locations mean to the Jewish people. And so, wow, did we learn a lot just on the bus. Loved every minute.
Oh, yeah. It seemed like to me Luke was talking and Zach was talking the whole time. I mean, if you asked a question, they answered. It was fabulous. But the reason I like this picture is right here in the middle, you can see there is the Temple Mount and the
Dome of the Rock is the building that is on that location now. But that gold dome is where the temple likely once stood.
So in our last program, we were right underneath that area. And so now, did we say that we thought we were driving south on this day?
I think we're driving south, yes.
I think so. These shelters were interesting to me. And, when we look at the pictures in the city, we see these houses that are built with these big rocks. I mean, the stone that they used, but I think these were Bedouin, weren't they?
It surprised me that within 10 minutes outside of the city heading south, you had these villages that looked like they were in a third world country. But on the other hand, that's how these people choose to live. It's nomadic people. It kind of reminded me of Abraham a little bit. And it just struck me that no houses have been built here. There's no urban sprawl like you experience in the United States of America. It's 10 minutes outside the city and you are definitely in the Middle East.
Oh, yeah.
And we saw the herds of goats. I think these aren't we?
Yeah, those are goats. It blew my mind that they're still raising goats on the same hills outside of Jerusalem, a tribe of Bethlehem, I think it was. I was like, nothing has changed in 4,000 years. Like, as an American, we went from Pilgrims to Manhattan in 250 years.
Yeah, so we landed on the moon and all kinds of things, but And of course, Israel is more advanced in medicine sometimes than we are. They do, so in a lot of ways, it's fascinating that all of the advances that Israel has made and has contributed really to the world in some of what they've discovered in medicine and such coexists with this ancient lifestyle that Ashley's describing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Ashley, if that has anything to do with the fact that they're eating kosher. And so they're very limited on what they're eating. So there's always going to be goat on the menu. Is this correct?
Yeah. Yeah. It's 10 minutes outside the city.
Yeah.
Just like it was 4,000 years ago. And that just so many things struck me as this is I'm back in Genesis, basically.
It does look like that's exactly what it looked like in Genesis. Yeah.
As another place, as we were driving along, we could see the palm trees, the date palms in the background. And then we were up close where we could see the trees planted in rows where they harvested from them. Again,
a lot of agriculture. What was it, Ashley, that we stopped and bought some fresh produce from someone? I ended up dumping it out at customs. But it
was cherries or something. It's amazing. They can grow almost all their own crops in that area. Right. I mean, it's the Fertile Crescent, but it's still just as productive. You have so many different climates for so many different types of food, which also points back to God promising to give Abraham's children a good land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And it's still that way today.
Yes, good point.
We were on our way, as we said, to Masada. So we got there, we got off of the bus, and this long walk, to me, I could see the perspective of here we are, and here's this, it's a mountain that it was on, but the structure itself was huge, built by Herod way back, wasn't it? Or had it been built before that?
The main structures that are there were built by Herod the Great. It was a vacation rental, basically, that he built to enjoy. I don't think he ever actually got to enjoy it, but it was something that he built for enjoyment.
Yes.
He is the same Herod that built that giant platform in the Temple Mount and the Second Temple, the same Herod that built ruins that you'll see near the end of this series at Caesarea Maritima. He was a huge builder and put in a ton of infrastructure just in time for Jesus to be born and for the gospel to take advantage of it. So he is evidence of how sometimes a ruler, though cruel and ungodly, can be doing what God needs them to do for something in the future.
Building roads and such that would be used for the gospel and all of that. Very amazing. But my understanding is, although this structure was not built until around the time of Christ, that there was Bible history in this area involving David, Ashley?
Yeah, this big mountain gives a panoramic view over the Dead Sea, up towards Jerusalem, to the mountains of Moab in the distance. So if you imagine, you can see the Dead Sea down. So if you take all the stones away, take the building structures away, this was a place where David likely went to hide from Saul. And there are caves as you drive from Jerusalem to Masada. There are thousands of caves in the hillside where people could have hidden. And so in the Psalms, David writes a psalm about God being his fortress. And the word Masada means fortress. So it's traditional to think that David wrote Psalm 18 when he was at this location. And I that if you guys would like me to.
Yes, love that.
So the Lord is my rock and my fortress. a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord, who addressed the words of this song to the Lord on the day when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. He said, I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. And that word would be my Masada. I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. The cords of death encompassed me, the torrents of destruction assailed me, the cords of Sheol entangled me, the snares of death confronted me. In my distress, I called upon the Lord. To my God, I cried for help. From his temple, he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. Then the earth reeled and rocked. The foundations also of the mountains trembled and quaked because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils, devouring fire from his mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from him. He bowed the heavens and came down. Thick darkness was under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew. He came swiftly on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him. Thick clouds, dark with water. Out of the brightness before him, hailstones and coals of fire broke through his clouds. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice. Hailstones and coals of fire. And he sent out his arrows and scattered them. He flashed forth lightnings and routed them. Then the channels of the sea were seen, and the foundations of the world were laid bare. At your rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of your nostrils. He sent from on high, he took me, he drew me out of many waters. He rescued me from my strong enemy and from those who hated me, for they were too mighty for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. He brought me out onto a broad place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. The Lord dealt with me according to my righteousness. According to the cleanness of my hands, he rewarded me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord and have not wickedly departed from my God. All his rules were before me, and his statutes I did not put away from me. I was blameless before him, and I kept myself from my guilt. So the Lord has rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands in his sight. With the merciful, you show yourself merciful. With the blameless man, you show yourself blameless. With the purified, you show yourself pure. And with the crooked, you make yourself seem torturous, for you save a humble people. But the haughty eyes you bring down, for it is you who light my lamp. The Lord my God lightens my darkness. For by you I can run against a troop, and by my God I can leap over a wall. This God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord proves true. He is a shield for all those who take refuge in him. For who is God but the Lord? And who is a rock except our God? And it goes on and on.
Amazing.
But he wrote that likely looking at this view that you see on the screen here, thinking, I can see for miles. I can see the enemy coming toward me. This broad, flat place on top of this mountain. God brought me here.
Well, and you can't help but think the people that had fled here during the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, that fled here wanting refuge, that they had to have been familiar with what you just read. Mm-hmm. Did they also, these Jewish people that fled this direction to try to get away from Rome, were they reading that every day? Mm-hmm. You know, that had to have meant something very, very special to them, especially the details of what you just read. You can really just picture that being their prayer during this time of judgment, really.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, it was I found it very interesting about Josephus's story of the what happened at Masada where as you say, the people came from the Jerusalem area and came here to seek refuge. And then the Josephus tells how the Romans camped around, and I think we can see there's kind of a square. I don't know if I'm showing it on the screen or not, where the ruins of a camp where the Romans had camped to around Masada. And let's see, I think this one really struck me. This long road, and all this way the Romans had to go to get water way out somewhere, way out, far out, and to come back. But they stayed, and some historians say it doesn't make sense. Why would the Romans have so many of their troops here just to get these few people? But Josephus certainly writes a really good story about how they determined to commit suicide rather than fight with the Romans or allow the Romans to fight with them or take them off into captivity. So, but that was a fascinating thing. I wanted you to talk some about this line. I found that just so interesting with all of the ruins that we went to. And go ahead, Ashley.
I think that's called I think it's like the restoration line. There's a black line you can see around the middle of the rock wall on your screen that kind of loops up on the right-hand side. Yeah. And that shows that the rock below is original and the rock above is restored to match it. So you can see when you're going to a lot of these sites what is original and what isn't. And I found it interesting at Masada, there's Roman encampments just left over, scattered all around, and a siege ramp that they used that goes up to the top of the wall. And to the Romans were thorough. And they would have viewed the Jews similarly, I think, to how Americans view terrorists, where it's like you want to get rid of all of them. So...
once it got into the 120s, after they had destroyed Jerusalem in the temple in AD 70, but by 120, they were so tired of the Jews, they just destroyed everything and everybody. It was either run and escape from the area, or you were going to be killed. There was no leniency.
Become their friend, like Josephus. He was a Jew, he was a Pharisee, and he decided to work with the Romans. And so they were open to Jews that were going to be, as they saw, reasonable. But it was a lot of the religious zealotry and the activities. The Jews were killing each other with their fervor over everything that was going on. And it's just if you read the works of Josephus, it is gory.
It's just such turbulence, so much violence and everything.
And to stand where that ramp, because we stood where the Romans climbed that ramp and came after them, and that just had to be absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, you had women, children, families here. And where I'm talking, I'm going to assume that what Josephus said was true, although it was probably exaggerated. So you'll see in one of these pictures, they have an area where they would have met for worship, a synagogue.
And
that's where. And it was also a place where they would make decisions. And so that's where they would have decided what their plan was as they were under siege, what's going on. And rumor has it they all committed mass suicide. The men killed their wives and their children, and then the men killed each other, which was common. That happened in several other locations with the Jews and the Romans. But the Romans, there's only 3 bodies that we know of that were found. We don't know what happened with the bodies.
It's hard to know. That's right.
967, if memory serves.
Yeah.
Quite a few souls there.
Yeah, so few survived. Go ahead.
One little point of interest that also happened right there around that synagogue area, just in the corner, really.
Oh, yeah.
There was a Hebrew man in there that was making copies of the Torah by hand. And so if you went in there and gave him a little donation and handed him something written in English, he would hand you back. He would write what you just wrote in Hebrew. And so a lot of us were putting the names of ourselves and our spouses. And so you would write both first names and a little heart in the middle. But so that was, if folks that are watching are going to be going to Masada, don't miss that. It's easy to miss. He's kind of hidden off in a corner, but that was really special.
I think we totally jumped all over your slideshow, though, Isla.
Well,
if you go back.
Don't worry.
I want to go back. I don't want. Yeah. So we were here.
I worked hard on this slide. No,
I know. This is
mikvah. Yeah. And we were there, and it was so desert. And the pictures that we've already shown, and there was no water. But Herod had built with the intention of being able to gather water, to collect water that rained, and to save it. And they did the same thing with the Jews, just continued that as the ones that went up there. And they had their mikvahs for that cleansing as well, plus enough water to keep them alive. That was amazing to me. Mm-hmm. But that was good. We went into the bathhouse, and this again was that Herod had built. As we were coming in, this was amazing to me, the mosaics, their attention to detail. It wasn't just one of those where, it wasn't necessary. You could have had that without all of that. But you see the mosaic there, Lord. And then here's a close-up of it. Little bitty tiles. How big were they? Y'all found some, didn't you?
Yeah, they varied. They varied in different places, like Shiloh, which we'll cover in a future lesson. Mom and I kept finding these perfect cube rocks, and it was like, what?
Very confusing.
Alien civilization came down to Earth and scattered these perfect white.
It didn't make any sense.
Made no sense at all until I realized, oh, they're mosaic tiles from somebody's floor. So, yeah, you can find them in the dirt all over, like pottery. But yeah, this was
a half inch by half inch, or an inch by an inch, generally.
Yeah. I mean, different patterns, different. They would have these in their floors, walls. It was a very popular way of decorating. So depending on how detailed they wanted to be, they can be pretty small. You can find a lot of Roman and Corinthian mosaics at different art museums.
We went into these Roman baths, and they had, this was original painting, we learned, and they had a steam room where they had the fire underneath, and then the water and the steam would come up and so forth. It was very intricate. And of course, it required a amount of water, of course, and then slaves to make this all happen. This is another side. I don't think this is the ramp.
No, this is the front of the fortress looking out toward. You can't see it in this picture, but on the day you could see a bit of green at the edge of the horizon, and that was the spring of En-Gedi. That's also mentioned in the Bible. It was in between this and the Dead Sea in the background. But I thought it was interesting as a Jew, you're escaping Jerusalem. You end up at Herod's fortress, which is basically a spa, and you get to be in a spa, and then it turns into a nightmare. And I thought about the psychology of that, of thinking that you're safe, and then realizing that not only are you not safe, but now the spa days are over, and that amount of a fall psychologically made me think, as an American, we are so wealthy. And I mean, I get Walmart groceries delivered to my house. I don't need to take my kids grocery shopping. I'm so spoiled. And what if that all disappeared? You know,
Mm.
if someone came to war with America, how much harder it is to suffer when you're spoiled.
Yeah. Yes. Well, they had water, they had food. I mean, Herod had set it up for that purpose.
They were living in a vacation rental.
Yeah. So when the Romans decided to get them, I mean, they just, like you said, they just full force. They just worked on it and until they were able to make it happen. So such a sad story. And one of the things I read about Masada, and that I don't know that Zach, our guide, brought it out so much, but it's kind of like the Alamo is in Texas. You know, Masada was to the Jews there that you know, will die rather than give up. You know, rather than give in. So I thought that was interesting. These were some more of the ruins, the walls, the areas, you know, how the things were built. We're so used to wood and drywall and, you know, and these were the walls that they had. And it's just so foreign to me. We're used to seeing ruins like that, but imagine to live in them. And the wood structures that were overhead, we can see how they've been reconstructing and all. So as we left Masada and then headed on to Qumran, we did drive by the Dead Sea and see some glimpses of the Dead Sea. It has just recessed so far from what it was originally.
Yeah, even from the 90s, it's gone down hundreds of feet. So, but they're working on pumping water into it from the Sea of Galilee and doing better with water management. So,
but there's more people, and then of course more tourism requires more water, fresh water, and so that makes a difference. It has an impact.
I thought it was interesting when Zach talked about that. Sometimes doctors will prescribe for people that are having skin issues. You know, I don't know if it's psoriasis or what kind of that, but that kind of neighborhood of skin challenges that there are certain doctors that'll be prescribed to them that you need to go down to the Dead Sea and rub this mud all over your skin and let it sit there for a while because it some doctors there believe it has medicinal properties in it that really help people with different kind of skin challenges. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is.
The Dead Sea was one of the places that I was really, really excited to see because the Dead Sea is first mentioned in the Bible. Do you guys want to guess?
Ashley, I'm going to give you a timeout.
Okay.
Because we're going to do the Dead Sea last. Is it all right?
Oh,
sure.
Okay. Oh boy, stay tuned. Stay tuned. It's a little teaser there.
We're coming on to it. So the next thing we did, let me see if I can get myself going again. We went to Qumran, and where the Dead Sea Scrolls had been found, and we looked at the community. They made pottery, of course. Everybody did to have for their dishes and so forth. It was where a community of people lived that were devoted to copying the scripture. Isn't that what y'all understood? That was their thing. And again, more mikvahs. You know, we were, I think, all struck by how many mikvahs constantly. And then the cisterns with the water in such a desert place, but they had a real system of gathering up the water that the little bit of rain that there was, they could gather it and keep it in that, so they would have water to drink. The Qumran was fascinating to me because recently we had studied in a ladies' class about how we got the Bible. And of course, the Dead Sea Scrolls were a huge part of the proof of the Bible and the authenticity of the writings that we had. This picture shows was how those scrolls were rolled up and put in these jars, sealed at the top, and then hidden at the time that the Jews who were here knew that the Romans were coming. That they knew there was more than just the usual unrest, but the Romans were going to be destroying everything. They just were after the Jews, after all. These were Essenes that lived here. But these were some of the caves when they I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with words, y'all. So they put these scrolls in jars, and then they took them into the caves, and they hid them in several caves all around, and some of them hardly accessible. It was amazing to me. We were able to stand at a spot where we could look over and look to see. You could see these cave openings. But one of the things they found with the Dead Sea Scrolls was all of Isaiah, a book that was totally Isaiah. And what was interesting was that the copy of Isaiah they found was 1,000 years older than the next oldest copy that they had. And when they compared the two, just the same. The Jews were so careful with their copying. And when they were able to put together fragments and to figure out what book it was and so forth, very, very few errors. And any that were there had no meaning no bearing on the meaning of the passage. But before 1947, much of what we believed was the Bible was a lot, not blind faith, of course, but it was come from copies of the works of the Bible that were not real old, But now when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, there were fragments of about 900 scrolls, so you can imagine these didn't last forever, But there were 207, it says, that were biblical manuscripts that had been written from the 3rd century before Christ up until about AD 68, because that's about the time that the Essenes would have left Qumran. And it was just amazing that of the very little difference between these very, very old manuscripts and the newer ones. And for me, in studying about the Bible, we look at the King James that was written from the newer manuscripts. And now we have translations that have come from some of these older manuscripts. And there's not that much difference, but they are richer, I think, in some respects. But it's amazing that there was very little difference between them from the older and the Isaiah, 1,000 years of copying Isaiah, recopying, copying, and they were basically the same. I mean, God took care of his word.
He keeps his word, that the word of the Lord is forever. And so a lot of people in the past were concerned about that. Like, what are the chances of it being exactly the same? Maybe it barely resembles what it used to say. And nope, this discovery, a lot of my faith rests on this kind of thing, just when the archaeological evidence bears out the authenticity of the Bible, that means a lot to me. What are your thoughts, Ash?
I love learning about the character of God by what he preserves and why, and what big biblically related events happen during what times of human history. It's as if he's planned it from the beginning.
Wow.
But so finding this in the did you say 40s? They found this?
Uh-huh.
So we are in war trauma time. Yes. And so it's like, why are we fighting these world wars? What is truth? How do we tell the difference between good and evil? Is it worth the sacrifice? And so to have these manuscripts hit the light during that era, to really solidify why America made the decisions that it made in those two really horrible, traumatic events in history was like medicinal. It's similar to when evolution was, growing and growing and growing in popularity, and the point of view of the timeline of the earth, and you have Mount St. Helens erupt in 1980 or 81 that proves how quickly forests can regrow, how dating new rock actually comes out as old rock and really messes with the data. You have this evidence.
Inconvenient truth, Ashley.
Yes. So I look at natural disasters or acts of God and to try to learn more about his character. I like the word artifacts because it's like a fact that's art. It's a piece of, it's hard to explain. It's getting late for all of us. But
artifact, because history is art. I mean, it's God's. This is God's work of art. This planet and the history on it is a story. It's a play. It's a real play.
Story.
History. And so an artifact is a fact about his story that's his art. I'm gonna have this happen in my perfect time for the generation that needs it in order to restore their faith. Perhaps. I don't want to assume that is how, but I try to pay attention to things like that. It made me think about, if I had not been raised in the church, where would I have started in my quest for what is truth? And so I would have asked, what is truth? What is truth? And I would have thought, well, let's go back to the oldest manuscript of the Gospels and see how old it is and what it says. And the oldest piece of papyrus from the book of John that could have been written when John was still alive, on one side says, what is truth? And the fact that it had that question on it, that I was also asking, the irony of that and the irony of God. It's a question that Pilate, the ruler, asks Jesus before he's crucified. What is truth? And then on the back, it talks about the Jews and their traditions and their beliefs. And that would send me into, well, what do the Jews believe? Where did they come from? Which would have sent me to Isaiah. And Isaiah is hyperlinked throughout the entire Bible. By having Isaiah as the complete scroll, you have of all of the books. It's just ironic and perfect, and it's
Isaiah's a miracle. It's all a miracle. The Isaiah.
Out of course it's Isaiah. Why? Because it's God. Because to this day of the tour helped me understand how God's truth is actually really obvious. And I know as Christians, we see evidence of it always. But I was thinking, if I hadn't been brought up in light, if I had been brought up in darkness, how hard would it have been to find the light? How challenging. If I was a Bedouin living in this area of Qumran, how hard would it have been to find truth? And I don't know if you have a scene on the next slide or if you're ready to move forward, Isla. I'll wait for you to move forward.
I don't. This is all I have about Qumran. Are you ready? The next one goes to the Dead Sea.
Yeah, from Qumran, you have a view, and I'm not sure if it's in the next one. It's behind the group picture, I think.
Okay.
You have this panoramic view.
Oops, there we are.
Yep, there it is. So way in the back, if you're watching this, you can see the tallest line of mountains. Those are the mountains of Moab. Yes. And then underneath that, there's a thin, maybe beige-ish, beachy looking space. And to the left, right behind John Weaver's head, is a piece of land. Yes, right there. Isla's got her cursor on it. Those are the plains of Moab. And what blew my mind is that's where Israel would have crossed into the promised land. So if I was a Bedouin way back in when Israel was wandering, everyone could have seen that. It's so public. It's center stage for a panoramic view. And you're watching, like, what is this pillar of fire and this pillar of cloud coming across? What is going on? It's obvious. It's
Something's going on.
It was also where Elijah ascended to heaven on a chariot of fire. That happened in view of every person surrounding this area, where it's like, what is going on with the guy going up to heaven? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? So it struck me as how before God's people maybe communicated with a lot of writing, or in an era of history where writing was only made for like receipts and land purchases or whatever. You're having the word of God and the actions of God way out in the open, way out.
Mount Carmel, like suddenly
you could see
Mount
that
Carmel blows up and it's like in the center of everything. Like what just came from the sky and consumed. Yeah. So many events. And also in biblical history, you see them also saying to each other, like, we've heard about you.
Like Rahab, Jericho, like, know what happened. But for some reason, in my mind, reading the Bible, I didn't think that these big events were super obvious. I thought they were kind of like, in a valley in between places. But when you go here and you see it for yourself, and you're like, are you telling me that I could have seen God's presence as a non-Hebrew, just standing here watching him working his people into their place? It made me think I need to pay attention more to when God is obvious and praise him for that.
Well said. Well said.
Also, the Dead Sea is mentioned in Genesis 14 for all of those who are hanging on for that fact.
Yes, we
the lowest place on earth.
Yep. Abraham went here. Noah's grandkids probably hung out here. If you look at how far away from the Ararat area that you could walk in a day or two, this was a medicinal place. So this is a place that everyone would have known about to use medicinally. Salt, you need salt to preserve your foods. This would have been a free for all. Let's go get our year's worth of salt at the Dead Sea. Yeah. This is where all the merchants came and went. This is Genesis. This was most Genesis of all the Genesis that I was so stoked to be there.
Tell us about the painting.
So I've been watching a show called Landscape Artist of the Year, and it's a little competitive show where people paint a landscape outside. It's very sweet. And so I did my first un plein air painting, where I took water from the Dead Sea and I watercolored a painting as I was looking at it at the landscape. And I ended up taking as many little vials and bottles of water back from Israel as I could to use in more landscape paintings based on my photographs later. So my treasures were water, which, I mean, I could just go into poetry about bringing water back from places. But yeah, that was my treasure, was water.
That's wonderful.
And you even got some rain, which was Luke Henry said was almost a miracle. Ashley got rainwater.
Yeah.
That was the holiest thing I've ever experienced in my life. That was unbelievable. That's beautiful. I think in the next episode.
I think so. I think the next day or so.
It was the third day. It was the third day that it rained. Don't even get me started on the third day. In Hebrew, the third day, that's the day that's doubly blessed in Genesis. And that's the day it rained. Anyway.
That's the day it rained. Little preview.
Preview for rain. There we go. Here are
So
some
see
of
the
our
little
company that are floating in the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
And as Ashley was showing us, where this picture was not made in the in front of the Dead Sea, but it was our whole group. And every day, I think we just got closer to one another as we were experiencing all of these wonderful happenings and the different sights that we saw. It was just a wonderful trip, and you can tell how it's affected, I think, all of us. And I think each of us who went on that trip had similar effect from it.
Yeah, highly recommended.
The last screen I have is, again, because of this war at the time that we're recording this program, that we continue to pray for Israel, just I think as we've prayed for the Ukraine during their war. It's just, war is a terrible thing, no matter how it comes about, and it's innocent people, civilians, who oftentimes suffer in that. And I personally pray for those people that that they will be able to have food and have shelter, during this time of war, because it's such a horrible thing. Cindy, how about you? Did you want to add something to this?
Oh, just that, yeah, our hearts connect with the people. I mean, Ashley and I would watch little children come off on and off the school buses. I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about the mothers. I've been thinking about in the airport. I remember seeing a father that had come off an airplane and his children running up to him. And it just, I don't know. There's just a special connection there. And so it's just sad. It makes me cry.
It is so sad to think of wartime. Ashley, a closing thought?
I pulled up the prayer of St. Francis to reflect on, as Americans currently living in a time of peace, and also for our brothers and sisters in Israel. It says, "Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, and it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life." So my thoughts are for humility, for peacemaking, for it is for forgiveness on both sides, because usually wars are started due to a lack of forgiveness, and Jesus is the answer.
Amen.
And it is in him, that we have the power to forgive. It is hard to forgive by our own power, but it is with his love and his spirit that gives us the strength to truly, truly forgive.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, viewers and listeners. And we hope that you are gaining spiritual insights as well as a joy from seeing our trip photos. So, we want to share that joy that we've had with you, and we want to share the spiritual truths as well. So thank you, ladies. Y'all are doing wonderfully. And
thank you.
So see you later.
See you later, Isla.
All righty.